Welcome back, this is Clyde speaking, and today's video I'm going to talk to you about why Bitcoin is the hardest money to ever exist. What do I mean by hard money? It needs to be scarce, there isn't an infinite amount of it. It needs to be decentralized, not controlled by one entity, company or government. It needs to be verifiable. You should be able to check every transactions made with it. It can't be hidden from the public eye. It needs to be portable, where you can take it anywhere with you from one country to another. And it needs to be censorship resistant, so no one can ban or stop it. In other words, it needs to be powered by proof of work. Let me tell you the history about money. 500 years ago, in the 15th century, Africans were using glass beads as their currency. They were colorful, rare, labor-intensive to produce, which means it was hard to counterfeit, to replicate. At least that's what they thought. Until the European colonizers arrived in Africa. They saw that the locals were trading goods using those glass beads. And as we know, Africa is rich with resources. They have a lot of gold and diamonds on Earth, something that the Europeans were lacking and wanted to have. So you know what the Europeans did? They began mass-producing glass beads in Europe and then flooded Africa with those beads into their market. The Europeans started buying up a bunch of land, gold, ivory, and of course slaves from the Africans, using those glass beads as currency. These African tribes literally sold off their fellow prisoners, their gold, land, and resources to the Europeans for worthless glass beads. They didn't realize it at the time, because all this time they thought glass beads were hard to produce and it's the currency everyone was trading with. Europeans saw an opportunity to trade worthless trinkets for valuable assets, and it costed them close to nothing to make, just to buy land, gold and slaves from the Africans. So again, the locals didn't realize that the Europeans had no limit to producing these currencies, these glass beads, seashells, cloth, iron tools. The Europeans had industrial capabilities to mass produce all these things that the Africans used as currencies. This resulted in Africans getting debased through monetary inflation, while Europeans gained real resources using artificial money. This historical event pretty much mirrors what fiat currencies are today. Governments print endless amount of fiat currencies to buy your time, energy, and resources. You literally give up your time, energy, and resources collecting money that the government can easily produce. What an unfair system, right? Throughout history, the people who controlled the money supply controlled everything. Glass beads was an inferior currency. Gold was scarcer and harder to produce than beads. Therefore, gold was the harder money. Because with gold, you can't easily mine them from the ground like you could making glass beads, cloths, and iron tools. So gold is the harder money. What can be better than this? But in 2009, something happened that changed everything. For the first time in history, we got a currency that no one can print more of, that isn't controlled by anyone, is 100% transparent with every transactions made, and it can be taken anywhere with you in the world. We got Bitcoin. Now compare that to fiat currencies, where it's controlled by corrupt governments, constantly getting printed infinitely, and are not transparent with where it's being used to the public eye. Bitcoin is the complete opposite. It is transparent, fixed in supply, and isn't controlled by one entity. The result? Here's a chart showing the value of fiat currencies over the years. It's going down to zero. And here's a chart showing Bitcoin over the years. It's going up forever. Bitcoin has no ceiling because fiat has no floor. Now compare that to gold. It's still being used today and banks hold a lot of it. It must be good, right? Unfortunately, gold suffers from rehypothecation from central banks. Banks love gold because they get to sell paper gold to you, telling you that you own gold on a piece of paper, but in reality, they don't own the right amount of gold in their vaults. They pretend they own 1,000 ounces of gold bars in their vaults, but if every paper gold investors withdrew it all at once, the banks won't be able to provide them with the right amount. That's rehypothecation. That's like you going up to your local bank and asking to withdraw, say, £10,000 from your own account, and they're just there like, nope, sorry, can't do that, we can't give you your own money in cash. They lie about how much gold they have in their vaults just to sell you a promise that your money is going up in value, but in reality, they're using your time and energy to buy real resources such as land, houses, crude oil, and companies you buy from. You know what this looks like to me? This looks like you're the Africans here trading with those glass beads, and the banks are the Europeans. So if you're a gold bug saying that gold will always be valuable, then you're like an African trading with glass beads while the Europeans inflate the number of the beads. Central bank inflate the number of gold in their vaults by selling you paper gold through institutions, and you give up your hard-earned money to buy paper gold. They buy up all the houses, shares of stocks and resources from you. They artificially inflate the amount of gold in their vaults. Just look at Fort Knox. When was the last time they got audited? Over 50 years ago. OMG guys, the Federal Reserve of America has hidden the number of golds in their vaults for over 50 years, and we're supposed to trust them with our money? You worked a job, traded your time and energy, only to give more power to central banks. The very same central banks that print money and allows investment firms to buy all the houses in your neighborhoods because they have access to cheap debt. Let me say that in another way. Central banks increase the money supply, making debt cheaper to borrow, which enables institutions to buy more houses, more shares of companies that you rely on, and ultimately inflating the food prices, inflating houses, increasing your insurance, and making you even more poor. And when you buy paper gold through ETFs and futures with these institutions, you're not buying real gold. You're buying a claim that is not backed one-to-one. Central banks don't have to prove they hold gold in their vaults. They are just selling you a promise. This system suppresses real gold's price, which keeps the US dollar relevant and preserves central bank power, all while giving you the illusion of owning a hard asset. Every time you buy paper gold, you indirectly give power to central banks. You empower the very system you're trying to escape, much like how the Africans were fooled by the Europeans with all those inflated glass beads. Even if you invest in gold, it's better to hold the physical gold to preserve your wealth. However, due to a lot of people holding paper gold, your physical gold is still being suppressed in value globally. There's a massive volume of paper claims flooding the market, and unless you shut down every institution selling paper gold, that suppression will never end. Do you understand? Until 2009, Satoshi Nakamoto gave the world something different, a money that cannot be faked, inflated, or controlled. Bitcoin is the exit. It is hope amongst chaos. Bitcoin gets audited every 10 minutes, so it doesn't hide any transactions. It's definitely more transparent than Fort Knox that hasn't been audited for 50 years. Bitcoin is fixed in supply. No one can increase the number of it. There can only be 21 million. Bitcoin is portable. You can transport it anywhere in the world, and it's divisible, which means you can send fractions of a Bitcoin, not just a whole lot. And it's not controlled by any single entity like the government or central bank, making it money for the people. It's very clear to everyone that the value of our fiat money is going down, and gold becomes no different when you start supporting central banks by buying up their paper gold. When you buy paper gold, you are supporting the very system that's robbing you of your time, energy, and future. So, to conclude, the hardest money will always dominate. Paper gold and fiat currencies today are equivalent to glass beads in the 15th century because they can all be printed and mass-produced to infinity. Gold is harder than glass beads because gold is harder to extract and produce than glass beads. But Bitcoin is harder than gold because Bitcoin is totally fixed in supply and the underlying asset cannot be rehypothecated. And that's why Bitcoin is not just the future, it's the final evolution of money. It is the hardest money to ever exist, harder than fiat currencies, harder than gold. If you want to break free from this system that's keeping you chained, you must first open your eyes and see the chaos in our system. If you learned something of value, I'd appreciate you leave a like and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this.